Welcome to the Church of Thomas. The Nature of Hell, 8/12/07. This is a very popular subject. Many ministers are driven potential Christians away by explaining the tortures of hell. Transgressions of the sinful being punished, but by hate. I remember the stories told of missionaries ripping the children from their parents to raise them in a civilized way. They told the children that it was sinful to speak their parents' language. They beat them into submission to the will of God. As they can probably imagine, there were three reactions by the children. If you're in an abusive relationship, you can submit to being a parrot of the dogma you're forced. You can dislocate and let the body submit, but going elsewhere in spirit, or you can rebel. The last can be very dangerous. In this particular case, the children would have been punished severely. And it led to a rebellion, which usually meant a total rejection of Christianity as a righteous religion. Today there are many Christians that break a key component of what Jesus taught. They were told to love each other as he had loved us. These so-called Christians hate and persecute the very people they should be reaching out to. The biggest club they use to enforce their judgment of others is the threat of hell. I've tried to help many youngsters that were good kids, but were told they were destined for hell. This message was pounded into them until they did one of the tactics I mentioned above. Some took the hate inside and ended their suffering by killing themselves. We all sin. The worst thing about the so-called Christians is they relegated others to hell, then broke whatever commandments amused themselves. I have found it ironic that the most strict interpreters of Scripture are also the most likely to break their own strictures. Dante painted a detailed description of hell. He made hell famously colorful. It is filled with all the retribution you can possibly imagine. We want to see a liar with their tongue impaled. We want to see sexual molesters being raped endlessly. We want to believe that the fire and brimstone is the end of a sinful life. It is very easy to twist the image of hell during the Dark Ages. The only people who could read were the clergy and some very rich individuals. The representatives of the Pope were notorious in their excesses. There were many clergy who took a vow of celibacy and then took advantage of their power to carouse with women. They consumed vast amounts of food when their people were starving. They took vows of poverty and then amassed great fortunes selling something called an indulgence. An indulgence was a piece of paper that was a get-out-of-hell-free card. For a price, the paper was sold to sinners. No repenting required. The church got very rich on this practice because all higher-ups got their cut of the action. This was the environment that Dante wrote his description of hell. Before this point, hell was a place of punishment. It was not a place of punishment. It was a place of limbo. The fiery pit had been described by Jesus was for fallen angels, demons. The church did two things that revisioned their outlook of hell. The first change was to make limbo a place for babies who had died before they were baptized. Second, now that limbo was out of the way, hell could be modified. The imagery of Dante's hell was better than they could have hoped for to create on their own. It was adopted whole cloth. It was very useful in instilling fear. Fear is a prominent tool of Satan. When the backlash against the abuses in the church started, this imagery was adopted by the new Protestant movement. They saw this as a great end for all those sinning clergy. And then, once they adopted their own version of it, they used it to terrorize the sinners within their own ranks. This is the Trinitarian point of view. I do it as a highlight to the differences. In the Reconciler Gospel of Thomas, verse 59, Jesus said, "Seek the one while you live on earth. If you do not seek before you die, the one's face will be unfamiliar. Being unfamiliar, you may not be able to find the one. If you are in limbo, you will not know the way to the light." Reconciler Gospel of Thomas, verse 82. Jesus said, "A person who is near me is near the warming fire of my love." A person who is far from me is far from heaven. They are in the dark, bitter cold of limbo. In the Church of Thomas, several other denominations, there is a different image of hell. It will take a little bit more imagination than the Dante imagery. Luckily, the entertainment industry has provided me with help. I'll use the original Star Trek series. One of the episodes was about an institution for the criminally insane. It was located on an isolated planet. The machine was developed by a doctor to help cure the patients of bad impulses. There was an uprising in the prison. The machine was modified into a torture device. An operator would speak into this void what they wanted the subject to remember, feel, experience. Everything else was removed. When Captain Kirk was forced into the machine to make him do their bidding, things went very wrong. The operator was to reprogram the captain, had to leave in the middle of the session. Instead of reprogramming, it became a massive sensory deprivation experience. He was almost driven insane. He was dying to hear even the torturer's voice. The Church of Thomas sees hell as a place that is without God. There is no worse feeling. It is a void. It is the original limbo. The more you have sinned without asking to be forgiven, the further from God you are. Not being able to see God even in the distance, you have no directions. You are literally lost. You have no signposts on the way to find heaven, and there are many people who are not Christians who will find heaven in time. It may not be the express route, just a great deal more hunting for signposts. Some of you may be saying, "What is so horrible about this limbo?" Imagine having no one to talk to, no feelings of a body, no pleasure, but also no pain. People who were made social for a reason. Try sitting alone in a dark room, awake. Most people, if they're not praying, would do one of two things: fall asleep or get intensely bored. Being social people allows us to help each other, but also to make this sitting in a corner possible. You would have no one to bully, no one to lash out at, no one to rant and rave at. You have only the hate and deeds you accumulated through your life. You get to mull them over forever if necessary. If the universe ends before you have figured out how to find your way home, you will cease to exist. That is a very long time to stew in the hell of your own mind. If you have served Satan during your lifetime and not repented the hate you sowed, you're in even more trouble. Even if you want to turn around, the chains of your slavery will keep you from ever finding a single signpost. When the universe ends, you will too. And also because of your close ties to Satan, they might drop by on occasion to tease you about your gullibility. After all, you did fall for their lies. Now I can hear a few of you saying it's not right to let them off the hook. I tell you that God has more mercy in little finger than you will ever need. If you have a teenager who hurts someone, you would deal with them harshly. Would you do the same thing to a 2-year-old? They may have hit someone with the same amount of injury, but they did not understand the hurt. They may have had trouble even remembering what happened a day later. That's the same with people. Angels and demons are held to a higher standard. The pit with its chains and fire remain for God's older kids. Please always use love to describe God. I do not want to see any more people driven from Christianity because of the threat of hell. It causes God great pain. God sheds many tears when people invoke His wrath instead of understanding it's their own vengeance. Never use threats of a fiery hell to make people toe the party line. God bless the whole world, no exceptions.